Hi, I'm Mika Frankl. This is the Cage Minds MMA show. Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to 2022. And I want to first off start by thanking everybody. Thank you for every like, every share, every view this past year, and every like, every share, every retweet on social media all the time. It is much appreciated. Like, it'd be much appreciated if you guys continue to go to the website cageminds.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, it's Cage Minds MMA show, subscribe to the podcast Cage Minds wherever you listen to your podcast, including this one right here. And if you're listening to podcasts, also subscribe, like, and share all the shows from the After Hours Podcast Network. We're talking about Talking Pro Football, MMA After Hours, and Pro Wrestling After Hours, the two shows that I do with Mr. Michael Carlisle. So you're liking and you're sharing all of those. You're not sure where to find them all. It's cageminds.com. The podcasts, you can find them all by going to cageminds.com/after hours, or just follow on the social media. It's Cage Minds Combat Sports News on Facebook. Also, the After Hours Podcast Network on Facebook. And then over on Instagram, it's at CageMinds_CSN. And on Twitter, there's Cage Minds MMA. And also my personal one, at Frankl Mika. Not to mention, you can find the MMA After Hours and Pro Wrestling After Hours shows with their own Twitter pages. So you can go back and forth right there with the show directly. We have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of fight announcements. I mean a ton since the last time I talked to you guys. That's where we're going to start off. Fight announcements from the UFC middleweight division. Caio Borrella out. Jamie Pickett will now be facing Joseph Holmes on the very first card of this year, January 15th, UFC Fight Night. Also, middleweight news, Ian Heinrich is out, and Sam Alvey is going to be taking on Phil Hawes on the same card that's going to see Alexis Davis versus Julia Storyenko. That's a women's bantamweight matchup. Those are both for the UFC Fight Night on February 5th. Just coming down the wire in light heavyweight news, Johnny Walker is going to be facing Jamel Hill. Also in heavyweight edition, Ilir Latifi versus Alexander Romanov. And in women's bantamweight action, Jessica Rose Clark versus Stephanie Egger. Those three are all for the UFC Fight Night on February 19th. February 26th, light heavyweight edition, Ryan Spann is going to be taking on Ian Kuntilaba. UFC 272 for March 5th. We've got a trio of editions. Women's flyweight action, Marina Moroz versus Mariah Agapova. Women's strawweight action, Marina Rodriguez versus Yan Xiaonan. And in men's flyweight action, Timothy Elliott versus Chazir Uglabalov. Actually, we do have a fourth announcement for that card. It's Dustin Jacoby versus Michael Omialanchek. That one, a light heavyweight bout. In middleweight action, Alex Pereira versus Bruno Silva. My gosh, is that incredible knockout bout. If you hadn't heard about that one, going to be incredible in the middleweight division. Two heavy hitters. Also in the featherweight division, Sadiq Youssef versus Alex Caceres. Also at featherweight, Damon Jackson versus Joshua Colabo. Those are all for the March 12th fight night. In bantamweight action, Marlon Moraes versus Sonya Dong. In women's flyweight action, Sabina Mazo versus Mandy Bohm. And in middleweight action, Dolce Lungbe versus Cody Brundage. Those have all been announced also for the March 12th card. So in all, that March 12th card gains about 7 fights in just a couple days. March 19th, Umar Nurmagomedov has had to pull out of that card, and Jack Shore will be facing Timur Valiev. Now for March 26th, UFC Fight Night, featherweight action, Siwoo Choi is going to be taking on Tucker Lentz, and then Askar Askarov versus Kai Kara France is in the works. That is the Fight Night in Columbus, Ohio. And the last card that we're talking about right now, April 8th, Pat Sabatini, Gavin Tucker has been rebooked for that card. And in women's bantamweight action, you got top contenders Irene Aldana versus Aspen Ladd. Bellator, to remind you guys, January 29th, Phoenix, Arizona. It's Bellator 273 heavyweight title unification bout. Ryan Bader versus Valentin Moldavsky. And for those wondering, as Scott Croker had alluded to something big in the works for Fedor Emelianenko for his send-off fight in July in Moscow, Fedor has said he is interested in running it back with Ryan Bader, to the surprise of very few. February 19th, Bellator will be back at the Mohegan Sun Arena for Bellator 274. 6 days later, Bellator will be in Dublin, Ireland. Bellator 275, main event there, middleweight championship bout as Austin Vanderford challenges Gegard Mousasi. One championship will be starting the year January 14th with one heavy hitters. Two championship fights on that card. The main event is a strawweight world title fight as Zhang Yingnan takes on Aka Marino. And then in light heavyweight kickboxing title fight, Roman Krillyan takes on Murat Aygun. The card will also feature UFC vet Yushin Okami and former LFA champion James Nakashima. A week later, Only the Brave, still talking about one championship action, 2 weeks later, that's January 28th, one Only the Brave. We're going to have a new heavyweight champion crowned as talks have stalled with the current champion. An interim champion will be crowned as Anatoly Malkachin takes on Kirill Grishchenkov. The card will also feature Murat Gagorian, a former Glory lightweight champion, former Glory lightweight champion Sidichai Setsongpilong, former Lion Fight champion Smokin' Joe Nanyawat, and former one welterweight champion Sebastian Katastem. Now coming back a little closer to home, we're talking about Texas. Fury FC, who's become a major feeder to the UFC in the last year. Well, they're going to have Fury FC 56, February 2nd in San Antonio, Texas. The main event is a light heavyweight title fight as Ty Flores battles George Tokos. And 9 days later, Fury FC 57 from Humboldt, Texas, Hussein Avi versus Andreas Quintana for an interim featherweight title. Going over to Invicta FC. Probably should have talked about this one a lot further up the bill. January 12th, this one kicks off the MMA year. You got Invicta leading into ONE FC in the UFC. We get the year started January 12th with Invicta FC 45, Alicia Zapatella, Jessica Deblani, Atomweight World Title rematch. It's a 6-fight card streaming live and free on the Invicta FC YouTube page. The number one feeder to the UFC, the LFA, starts off their year with LFA 121. That one is going to be January 14th. Your main event has Aaron McKenzie versus Joshua Jones. And then your co-main event is Elijah Johns versus Brandon Phillips. The promotion will then go from Texas to St. Louis for LFA 122. With the flyweight title on the line in the main event as Charles Johnson defends against unbeaten Brazilian Carlos Mota. And in the co-main event, Brant Moore versus former title challenger Arthur Estruzoulis. So that's to catch you up on what most of the biggest promotions in MMA are doing and how they're starting off the year. Again, we're still waiting for, I'd say, a lot more substantial layout of a plan for where you're going to see everything from the PFL next year. That's why they were unmentioned. But at this time, I think it's time to reset the table. We're heading into the new year. If you were looking for the award show, gotta be honest, that is over there at MMA After Hours. Me and Michael Carlisle did an award show, look back at the biggest, best moments, fighter of the year, upset of the year. All of that can be found on that podcast. On this podcast, we're just going to look forward. We're going to set the table and tell you guys what to look forward to from Bellator and the UFC this coming year. Now we'll start with Bellator's women's flyweight division. Yes, Juliana Velasquez has cemented herself as a champion with the defense over Denise Kuhlholz. That was a split decision victory. I don't see an obvious number one contender. Is there a rematch with Lee McFarland on the horizon? Anything could happen in that women's 125-pound division, and it would not be a surprise. Chris Cyborg made short work of Sinead Kavanaugh, and obviously she's carrying the promotion, not to mention the banner, for the women's 145-pound division at this point. The Kat Zingano fight, to me, is the most alluring fight that Bellator can make on their roster. That gives us one of the biggest headlines in the MMA that's kind of been overlooked the last couple weeks due to Amanda Nunes' loss. Kayla Harrison is still a free agent, and where she signs is pivotal to the PFL and Bellator. They should be both engaging in a huge back and forth negotiation, outbidding each other, a bidding war like MMA has never seen before for a female talent. And where Harrison decides to sign is crucial. That Cyborg fight is huge, and she is the face of the PFL coming into the next year. So Zingano Cyborg would be the most logical big fight right now that the roster can currently make for Bellator. Jump on over to the men's divisions. Bantamweight, we got the World Grand Prix coming up this year. That's going to be outstanding. Even though I look at it, we could already be down to the semifinals because we've seen a lot of these matchups. They're still very talented, and you'd be shocked if they play out in the exact same manner they did the first time. Featherweight division, we do have the champion, AJ McKee. He needs to be the Bellator Fighter of the Year. I think that he needs to be on the forefront of everything Bellator this year. He is a young potential superstar that they need to put out there in the media, use that Viacom push, and make AJ McKee, the mercenary, a megastar. Now, does he have some credible challengers and some intrigue heading into this year? Some tough tasks? Do you run it back with Patricio? Do you go up to 55 and go after Patricky? Do you end up having to take on Adam Borish, a 3-fight win streak? Aaron Pico is gaining momentum, and it felt inevitable that those two young super prospects would collide one day. Is that day coming this year? 155 pounds. Believe me, you have Islam Mamedov, and you have Usman Nurmagomedov. You also have Brent Premise. So Patricky, including AJ McKee in that mix, has 4 very different stylistic challenges hunting his title. Be interesting to see which way the Bellator 155 division direction they go, which challengers, who they make fight who, and who gets that elusive first shot at Pitbull. For the welterweight division, we know that Yaroslav Almaslov is going to be taking on Michael Venom Page, and in case anything happens, I'm still going to tell you that Jason Jackson is the real number one contender, and he is waiting there in the wings and deserves to fight for the title this year. At 185 pounds, we already mentioned Mousasi versus Vanderford, and the next guy up in the division, Johnny Eblen, is the name. Devastating in his last 3 victories. He is the guy that could be an even stiffer test, I think, for Mousasi than Vanderford. Light heavyweight division, we obviously got to see the World Grand Prix play out. The heavyweight division, we have the title unification fight coming, and Fedor's retirement looming, or quite possibly his one more time retirement fight. Now let's transition over to the UFC. Start off with the women's divisions once again. When you look at the women's bantamweight division, we're going to go to the bantamweights real quick because that's the most alluring, the biggest, the banner division of the women. It's the division that started, that brought the women to the octagon. So we'll start with them. We know that there's going to be the rematch. Pena Nunes 2, all but assured. That's all the feeling in the room. Aldana just got booked to take on Aspen Ladd. Caitlin Vieira, coming off of the win over Misa Tate, is a very viable contender in her own right. And Holly Holm is still looking to get back to training after being sidelined due to injury. The women's flyweight division, Valentina Shevchenko eating up challengers and spitting them out, making her way back down the rankings after having climbed to the title. Talia Santos may be the next contender in line. Then again, Miesha Tate has said she's intrigued to drop to 125, and Jessica Andrade would like to welcome her to the division now that Tate's best friend, Juliana Pena, has the women's bantamweight title. And if you're looking for some prospects, Erin Blanchfield just outside of the rankings, Casey O'Neill, and Mana Fiore at the bottom could inject some new life into the 125-pound division. When you look at strawweight, we're all awaiting to see the official date of Namajunas Esparza 2. Maybe that got a little bit more difficult after the Esparza-Danielle Kelly grappling match, where a slam led to Esparza's eyebrow exploding. See how long it takes for her to heal from that nasty cut. We already told you earlier in the show that Marina Rodriguez is fighting Yan Xiaonan. That is a #1 contenders bout and could lead to that winner leaping Esparza due to that cut. I'm not guaranteeing it, but there's a possibility depending on when the UFC needs to make another title fight. Need may dictate the demand of when this title fight gets made. And when we jump over to the men's flyweight division, don't forget that the trilogy fight happens at UFC 270. We've been giving all the love, all the allure, and all the focus on many of the shows I've been on to talking about the heavyweight division. Francis Ngannou, Ciryl Gane, heavyweight title unification bout at UFC 270. But don't forget, January, you will also see in the first pay-per-view of the year, the flyweight championship trilogy come to an end. Does Brandon Moreno send Davidson Figueiredo up to 135 pounds, or does Figueiredo regain the title? You have Askar Askarov and Kai Kara France looking to be booked in March. I mentioned that. And Alex Perez versus Matt Schnell has been rebooked for February. So Askarov, Kara France, and Perez all in the top 5 and all going to be active here in the first quarter of the year. So it'll be interesting to see in that third quarter of the year, who gets the next flyweight world title fight in 2022. The bantamweight division, Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling has to happen. The champion has been out on the town being very vocal, being very visual. He's out there, his presence is known, and Sterling wants you to know he's the bantamweight champion. All of that is leading me to believe that he's healthy, and we're going to hear Jan Sterling announce soon. That leaves us, what's next for TJ Dillashaw, Jose Aldo, Dominic Cruz. 2 of those 3 legends fight. Maybe 2 of them meet again. Those are all really intriguing matchups, not to mention Marlon Vera coming up the rankings. Sean O'Malley needs to take a big fight, and Adrian Yanez was knocking everybody out last year, and he is going to attack the top 15. At 145 pounds, Volkanovski Holloway 3 has been assured. The very first fight night of the year on January 15th is headlined by Giga Chikadze versus Calvin Kattar, and that is an opportunity for Chikadze to just explode as a superstar. And don't forget Josh Emmett and Arnold Allen, 2 streaking top 10 contenders that can really make their cases for title opportunities this year. In the lightweight division, Charles Oliveira has cemented himself as the king, and will he be facing Justin Gaethje, or unfortunately taking the big payday of Conor McGregor in his next title defense? We also have Islam Makhachev and Beneil Dariush February 26 to basically say, hey, once we announce if it's Justin or Conor, the next guy is already there. Islam or Beneil is right there in the wings waiting, and they deserve an opportunity to wear the gold. In the welterweight division, Camaro Usman versus Leon Edwards 2. That would be the most likely direction for the welterweight champion to take his defenses. You still have Bilal Muhammad, Sean Brady, and Hamzat Chimaev aggressively coming up the rankings. At UFC 271 in Houston, we're going to have the middleweight world title fight. The rematch, Israel Adesanya, Robert Whittaker 2. And you also have the number one contender fight right there on the same card, Derek Brunson versus Jared Cannonier. The light heavyweight division, Glover Teixeira has the title, and we know by June he should be defending it against Yuri Prohaska. You could also look at going further down the year that Magomed Ankilov, Anthony Smith is happening in March, the same month as Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic. So we have the title fight on the horizon, and we can even, in the first quarter of the year, have another number one contender announced. And that leads us all back around to the heavyweight division, where we kick off the year with Ngannou and Gane, the heavyweight title unification bout. You have Stipe Miocic, John Jones, and Derek Lewis all lurking in the shadows, waiting to see how that one plays out. You have guys like Taya Tuivasa, Tom Aspinall climbing up the ranks. Even though he stumbled and got knocked out by the Black Beast, I haven't given up on Chris Daukaus. And Jair Rosenstruck has enough power that he will keep himself in the mix in the heavyweight division. I'm expecting some incredible fights. I'm expecting some people that I didn't even mention here to become household names by the end of the year. Welcome to 2022. Thanks for watching Cage Minds.